Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And as you may have been noticing, if you've been listening the past few weeks, I've been focusing a lot on local history. I had Stephanie Longo talking about the Italian American history, which is, part of October. That's a big part of this month. We were talking about the different, so much Italian pride and culture in the northeastern Pennsylvania region, Lackawanna County. Before that, I had Julie Esty, who talked about her dearly departed players doing an awesome job every year in the Dunmore Cemetery, telling stories from the graves of people who've lived in the Scranton area long ago. And this week, I am super excited. Anyone who knows me knows that I have been screaming pride about Scranton for years. I remember going to Penn State and people will always have things to say, but, there were comments, maybe derogatory comments through the years. And I always like to say, I get on my soapbox because I am really proud of being a Scrantonian. I have lived here my whole life. I went away to Penn State, came home, and I chose to stay here. And I've made a life here for myself that I'm really proud of and have met wonderful people, love the arts, the culture, the beauty of the architecture. I had friends visit from France who were blown away by the architecture, the nature, everything. So I am really, really excited anytime I can promote something that helps people to understand the region and want to visit the region. And even people here who we sometimes forget how wonderful it is and how great the people are. So to get started, I'm going to be talking about something Scranton, and I'm probably going to mess up the name of it, but it's our story and it's part of, I think, our nation's story. It is a project that is all encompassing with a lot of different components to it, all to get a sense of pride for Scranton, people in Scranton, the opportunity to tell their stories and to get a better understanding of it, because I don't know all the details. We're going to start off with Julie Schumacher Cohen. So Julie, and I hope I got your name, said it correctly. We'll start off with you. Just make sure you take off your mute there because I see that you're still muted. There you go. Welcome, Julie. Thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thanks so much, Janine, and we're really glad to be able to talk a little bit about this project. So you got it pretty much right. It's called Scranton Story, Our Nation's Story. I work at the University of Scranton, but it's a community-wide project with many different partners. So it's really meant to be something for everyone. And it's funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. So we always want to thank them for their support, for the federal government support. One of the important pieces about the project, obviously, as you can hear from the title, we're making the claim that we think Scranton has stories, some of which have not been told as much, some underrepresented stories. When we think about Black history, we think about Indigenous experience here, recent immigrants and refugees, as we'll talk a little bit more about in this program. So some of those stories are lesser known, and then also are lots of stories that I think are really important that also can be woven into that. So our hope is to tell a kind of inclusive and full story of Scranton, and by doing that, helping to tell our nation's story, more honestly and more fully. And hopefully even that this will be the kind of project that other communities would also be able to use in their cities and towns, because I think it's part of our community building, and it's part of our being, thinking about how we can be living up to our experience and our identity as a kind of pluralistic democracy. So the theme from the National Endowment for the Humanities is a more perfect union. And it's they're funding these projects in the run up to the 250th anniversary of the United States in 2026. So it is a part of that community building, that democracy building, getting folks out and participating in their community as a part of, I think, a way of strengthening our democracy.
And so you said it's kind of a theme. Did they set the theme, and now it is being done in different cities throughout the country as well?
So they set the theme, a more perfect union, and then we came up with the Scranton Story, Our Nation's Story. And I like to say that we found out about the grant in the fall of 2020 when it was like deep COVID, and all of us all we were doing was sitting on Zooms. But we had some creative sparks that went off on those Zooms, and we came up with, and so it was various people, university and community partners, who came up with the sort of idea and the 8 themes. So there are 8 themes, and they do try to cover major aspects of Scranton, and we're halfway through that project. So this fall, our focus has been on the industrial history and experience of Scranton, thinking of, we've had events on the anthracite strike of 1902, for instance. That was a huge event in Scranton, but it meant a lot nationally for labor history, for, union organizing, for the things we take for granted today about, 8-hour work weeks, all those kinds of things. Scranton had a place in that conversation that was bigger than just our city. So that's one of the themes that we've been focused on. But so the way that we focused in sort of talking about Scranton as a kind of place-based text, as a city and a community, that was our idea. But we'd be happy if people, take it and run with it in other cities and communities around the country.
Oh yeah. And I think I know, I don't know where I first saw it. I think I saw it on Instagram, different people sharing their stories, which I thought was great, but I've also seen it out at different community events, St. Joe's Center, First Friday around the courthouse. I saw, people put the sticky notes, and they could say, something about Scranton. And I will say, and not to veer off negative, but you'll have people who maybe, unfortunately, they get stuck on the negative. I appreciate it. And I remarked to a friend, I appreciate it that you didn't remove stickies that weren't just, a happy unicorn, and flowers. There were a couple criticisms, but you had them up there, which I appreciate, because allowing people to have a voice, hopefully they can see past what they see as flaws or criticisms, or if they see them, hopefully they can try to contribute to help us move in a more positive direction. But I appreciate it that you allowed those up there, because it is a democracy, and letting people share their opinions, no matter what they are exactly.
No, that's very intentional, actually. We of course, there are many wonderful, stories of resilience and sort of happy stories, but every community and every country has flaws and problems. And I think that's part of our theme of the More Perfect Union. We know that we're not perfect. There's a lot of flaws in American history, and we need to keep working on them. When we think about race, we think about, again, the indigenous history, all these things are still present today in problems that we have. So even when we go out into these community engagement, interactions, if someone wants to talk about Scranton and there's an experience that they've had that's been difficult and challenging, we want to hear that, because that's part of making our community better.
Absolutely. And, I, like I said earlier, introduction, I am really proud of the region, but of course, I see, the challenges that we have, and we have had, and, there's been ups and downs. What would you say, as just you being part of it, have you seen that has anything really made you, it's twofold, really feel proud, and on the other hand, make you kind of go, okay, something to focus on going forward that we can work on?
I've been really kind of fascinated by, so we've had, a year of programs so far. We had one in the beginning that talked about Scranton in the popular imagination. So how does Scranton get talked about, which sometimes can be kind of a cliche. So for instance, sometimes Scranton even now is thought about as a predominantly white city, but yet we're a growing city in terms of our representation of communities of color. So trying to kind of correct that and talk about who's really here and who has been here. But one of the things I've really enjoyed too is that people do come out for some of the events in particular ways. So for instance, the event that we just had about the garment industry and the anthracite strike, people showed up who had grandparents who were in the coal mines, and people whose mother and grandmother worked in the garment industry. And I think it shows that people want to have their place recognized in a city's history. And so the more that we can do that, and the more that we can do that for also, again, more of the underrepresented stories. So the Black history of Scranton and the recent immigrants and refugees, because ultimately I think our project is around thinking about how we all belong here, and how do we make that real? How do people really belong in a city and in a country? And there's lots of times when, unfortunately, many people in the United States do not feel that they belong, or that they're really being welcomed, or that they're really being supported. So our effort to do that here, I think, is really powerful. And but I think people need to be affirmed in their identity and the fact that they have a place and that they have a role to play.
Absolutely. And I think when people do feel that, then I think they're more likely to want to contribute as well. Right. And I mean, if we have a community where we're all contributing, it can only make the place better, the city better. And I think that's wonderful. One thing I think is interesting, I had a podcast, I think it was last year, I had Tim Holmes on from Scranton, and we talked about the office convention. And while I'm a huge fan of the show, and I do appreciate, people point out that it got, Scranton good publicity and people want to come visit. Well, I think that's great. I think that's part of the story, and it's a small part of the story. And if it gets us positive press and things, that's wonderful. But I personally, just as someone who's been here my whole life and I'm proud of, the people I've met in the region, I would hope people see beyond that and know that there's so much more than going to Cooper's and getting a Dunder Mifflin shirt. I hope they take the time to actually learn, go visit the iron furnaces, or go to the Anthracite Museum and learn about the history, the rich history of this region, the Ritz Theater, how actors from way back in the day made it in New York City because they played here in Scranton. So I would hope people would, take an opportunity to even learn more. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Julie, because again, it's been great, but we also want more than that, I would think.
Yes, we do love The Office. My son is a middle schooler who loves it. He's watched more episodes than I have, but no, the first event, especially when we talked about Scranton, the popular imagination, was really to kind of have a discussion about that. How are we known? So it's, we're known by now. We have a president who's from the city of Scranton, and all of those things are part of, we sort of play some kind of outsized role in America in a way, and I don't think we're exaggerating that. But then also, why is that? And who are the people that are here? What have their stories been? What is our future here in the city of Scranton? Obviously, it's more than a television show. I mean, we're a real, I forget who locally has done Scranton is Real, like the t-shirt or something. So we're a real place. We're an authentic place. We're a place that people have struggled, that people have obviously persisted, where we have problems that still need to be resolved. But I think we're in that sense, we're a microcosm of the United States, and we still have more distance to go again to be in that sort of idea of the kind of more perfect union.
What are you looking forward to as you continue this project going forward? Is there anything particular that you're looking forward to that's coming up, or something that you're just especially excited about seeing grow or progress?
So three of the themes that I know we're gonna another colleague is going to talk more about the migration theme we have coming up, but I'm really excited about that. I think there's so much to be said about the different communities that have come here from around the world, and just having more time and attention to talk about their stories, and also to think about how that connects back to other immigrants who have come here during the coal mining era. The Black history theme, the work of the Black Scranton Project and others in the community to really, I first moved to Scranton, I'll be frank, I didn't know much about the Black community here and what their story was. And I think that there's been a lot of good attention to that in the last couple of years, but to be able to further highlight that. And then we have an Indigenous leader who's coming in November. And that's just been a really fascinating experience to get to know him. His name is Curtis Zuniga. He's part of the Delaware tribe, the Lenape Nation. So one of the nations that was here before it was the city of Scranton. So this is his ancestral homeland, and it'll be the first time that he's coming back to northeastern Pennsylvania. And just to think about that idea of, he's talked about inclusion and empowerment, and obviously there's a lot of difficult history of forced removal and all of what happened with colonization. But I think he has a really important vision about how we can look ahead to the future and learn from one another. So I'm very excited about that. And then, of course, the oral histories that you'll hear more about from Kimberly. That's kind of the culmination of the project. And so I think that's where we will have something that will be able to be, there for sort of posterity. We're going to archive them and be able to share these stories and have them be a resource for educational purposes and things like that. So that's an exciting element as well.
That sounds great. Well, before we move on to Kimberly, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say anything else that you wanted to say, and also to ask for someone out there listening that's just like, oh, I didn't know about this, but why should someone care who lives in Scranton? Why would you like them to be engaged with this project?
Well, I think, I'm not from Scranton originally. I'm from the New York, New Jersey area. I came here as somebody who is sort of, I came here to work at the university. So I've been here for about 13 years. And I think we have something really special here. I think we have a really authentic community, an eclectic city, a city that's got a lot of history and a lot of grit and character, and people from all over the world, really, and have, one of the quotes that we've used from the Irish American author Colin McCann. He said, "The one true democracy we have is storytelling. It goes across borders, boundaries, genders, wealth, and race. Everyone has a story to tell." And I find that with people I meet in Scranton, that there's always amazing stories to tell. And I do believe that doing that kind of exchange across difference, across people that you might not otherwise meet, is powerful and community building. And I think if we can do that well here in our community, that's a helpful activity and practice for this country.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to move on to your colleague, Kimberly Crafton, and she's going to talk to us about the oral histories. And I'll admit, I don't know much about it. So I'm just going to say, tell me about this, Kimberly, and how this fits in, what's going on.
Well, this is a portion of the project that kind of is a capstone of this building, these layers of conversation across many different themes that Julie was referring to. Why it's important is that all of the themes that Julie mentioned are intended to stir the deep cauldron of experiences and ways to discuss who we are and what we have learned, where we are going, where we have come from. And it's a way for people to actually respond. So we stir the cauldron, we begin these conversations, but how do people respond? We're trying to open up the door for a lot of people to be able to do that. The Oral Histories Project is actually a way to capture in interview form 25 to 30 stories across the spectrum of Scranton. That's the kind of the end goal. But in doing that, of course, we realize that there's no way to capture all of what Scranton is in only 25 to 30 stories. And we didn't want other people who might have incredible things to say and experiences that were emblematic of a much broader vision than we could ever catch with 25 to 30 stories to be able to have that input as well. So we wanted to make an invitation while we're having these great humanities discussions for people to be able to participate in a broader way with that whole process.
So so the 25 or 30, you mentioned that, but so I've seen along the way, and maybe hopefully I'm going to articulate this well enough. I've seen along the way on the social media, different people sharing their story. Is this something that like I know anyone can pretty much go to the website. Now I know that's not exactly the same thing, but anyone can share their story, right? Of being in Scranton, and they can go to the website to do that.
Absolutely. So the website is on the University of Scranton's page. And if you look up Scranton's story, our nation's story, you'll find both Instagram, Facebook, and the actual web page of it as well. And all of those have ways that you can participate in presenting a thought that you have. And, not everyone feels like being as engaged as others. So, if you just have a word you want to share, as you said, we've been also out in the community with what we call the Scranton Stories booth, because you really need to be at the community events to get people in the community to be more aware of what's happening and feel that they are invited to participate. And that's the largest part of the entire Scranton story, our nation's story, is to invite participation in discussion and in capturing that humanities connection to who Scranton is, who we are, in connection to that broader democracy idea of the United States of America. It's really important that we are emblematic of, the nation's story, both in the past, in our history. And I, like you, have been a cheerleader for decades, trying to explain to people the complexity and the beauty and the very realness that Julie was talking about. We're an authentic place, that not every story is a happy story, but our culmination of stories is magnificent, absolutely magnificent, and very emblematic of where we are going as a nation. I think it's good to look to ourselves to see, our thoughts of the nation. We might look at the nation and say, wow, we're both wonderful and we have terrible problems to solve. And if we look at ourselves, we might be able to find ways to, bring our own solutions, our own hopes and endeavors into that larger conversation. If we can have these conversations at home about who we are at home, then we can also participate on a larger scale and our thoughts and aspirations for our nation as well. So really, the Scranton Stories booth going out to all of these different communities is a way to both educate people about what's happening and invite them to participate, not only in the oral histories portion, but in all of the themes that are unfolding, and be able to input their thoughts and experiences onto these various social media sites so that their voice can become part of the communal voice, which is really just a snapshot of who we are as Scrantonians at this moment in time.
Yeah. And excuse me, I know we talked earlier, there have been opportunities for some real in-person conversations, which after coming off of the pandemic was kind of, something unique after being on Zoom and like trying to get used to talking again. How have those events unfolded, and how has the conversation been rich? I know, again, people are kind of getting used to just being back out there having conversations. Have you been part of those? And what did you see come out of those? What was that experience like?
As far as traveling with the Scranton Stories booth and how the different events have been going. It's really interesting because each event, and as you said, we've gone to a great number of different events, and we hope to be part of many more. Each one has a little bit of a different feel. And as we were imagining all of this, we thought, well, maybe people would really want to sit in front of a camera and tell their story. But it hasn't been that as much as a really wonderful just engagement with people that got them excited and proud again about being a Scrantonian. When they see that we're looking at the ideas of, how do we present and perceive ourselves? They say, wow, yeah, there is a lot to say about this. And so we've seen it kind of stirring people's thoughts and pride. And as you mentioned, their feelings about what challenges we face also. So it's been more of a stirring the pot of community feeling, more than getting a really deep, in-depth conversation. But in those moments, we've been inviting people to contact us if they would like to go deeper into that conversation. And we have a wonderful, as Julie mentioned, committee of community groups and partners that we are reaching into various, many corners of the community across as broad of a spectrum as we can, to try to have people suggest to us people whose stories might be considered for what we're calling our spotlight stories. In the midst of this great community conversation, we are also looking for people that we would like to consider for those spotlight stories. That would be those 25 to 30 more in-depth looks at the lives of those people as Scrantonians and their feelings about our connection to the nation's story.
So those now, though, that will be, is that kind of like the culmination? You'll close with those 25 to 30 stories, and those will be more in-depth interviews. And then will those be video, or will those be written about? How is that going to be captured and archived?
Mm-hmm. Those will be videos that will be available on both our partners' websites, certainly on the university and the Scranton Stories website, and on our partners' websites and YouTube. So they will be broadly available. They will also be featured in a specific event, kind of a culminating event for the project itself, but also transcripts of those, pieces of those, and all of the different input that other community members have had. All of that, the material collected through the oral histories process, will be archived at the Weinberg Memorial Library at the University of Scranton. So that's an important humanities piece going forward, is that our larger snapshot is being captured and collected as part of this process.
Oh, that's wonderful. So it's not just the longer, more in-depth stories, but all of this along the way will be preserved.
Correct.
That's great.
Because social media is, it's wonderful, but it is also temporary as historians look at it. It's not written on paper. It's a very ethereal, kind of ephemeral thing. It can disappear if our systems crash. So the fact that it would be preserved in a more stable way is very important to us.
Yeah. And I mean, who knows in 20 years, 30 years, it's not going to be Instagram. It's going to be something else. Right. It might be something that you can like poke at your retina and you're seeing something God only knows. I can't even imagine. And by then I'll be too old to use it. At least I'll feel too old to use it. But anything else before we move on to Alejandra that you would want to say about this piece of it, or about your experience, especially as someone who has lived in Scranton?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as someone who has lived and worked in Scranton, I'm madly in love with the range of our stories. My heart breaks, my heart sings, and it does everything in between when I think of the people in this region. Because again, it's just so real. I think looking at our nation, it's the way we need to feel about that as well. We've had a dialogue that talks about us as, the greatest nation in the world. And I think it's good for us to become more mature as a people and look at ourselves more holistically. Yes, we are great in some ways, and we've got so much work to do in other ways. And all of those themes that Julie was talking about are part of our maturation as a, a country now reaching our we're just getting out of our teenage years, maybe, hopefully, possibly, as compared to other countries in the world. And so being part of that excites me. As far as, something to bring forward to people looking at how do we participate in that, in addition to the website and the social media that we were speaking of, that you could certainly input, and we welcome it. We're hungry for your stories and excited to share that collective voice. But there's also an event coming up in October at the Black Scranton Project Arts and Culture Center in Providence, right at Providence Squares in Scranton. And it's a partnership between the University of Scranton, the Black Scranton Project, and the Lackawanna Tintype Project, which is, if you know what a tintype is, those are those wonderful photos from history where it's kind of gray at the edges. It almost looks like it's printed onto a piece of tin, and that's kind of what it was. So your image imprinted to look like a historic photo. So we're inviting people to come get a tintype of yourself. We're calling it literally picture yourself in history. You can just take a snapshot of yourself that looks like a historic photo. But the Scranton Stories Project will be set up there as well, the Scranton Stories booth, where you can, again, bring to us parts of your story, get a picture of yourself with our little hashtag I am Scranton as well, and get your tintype photo. But it's a great way as the community to come together. And this is October 8th and 9th at the Black Scranton Project Center for Arts and Culture at from 2 o'clock until 5 o'clock, Saturday and Sunday, October 8th and October 9th.
That's wonderful. And that's my neighborhood. I'm Providence. So that's right down the road from me. That's awesome.
I'm looking forward to seeing your tintype. It'll be a good one.
That sounds very cool. I like that idea. That's really neat. Well, people love taking pictures of themselves. So why not do a little twist on that, right? Something a little different. That's very cool.
Your historic selfie.
Yes, that's very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Kimberly. I appreciate your input. So I'm going to move on to Alejandra, and it's Marroquin, I believe. I practiced before, but I don't know if I messed it up. So Alejandro is going to talk to us about the portion of this that involves the immigration, but not, we often think about, of the Italians, the Irish, the Polish, the, different Europeans that came here, but the stories are similar. We talked before, the wave of immigration now that's happening, and maybe people aren't quite seeing it the same, or maybe resisting or having different ideas on it. But you're going to talk to us about that piece of the project and an awesome event that's going to be coming up as well at the end of October 25th. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us, Alejandra.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So yes, that is one of the rich stories about Scranton, that it was really European immigrants who came many, many years ago. And as Julie and Kimberly were saying, the garment and the mining, they really were the people who kind of founded this city. And we know a lot about them, or there's a lot of history about them, but there's also other ones, as it was mentioned, where it's not so much heard about because it's more recent history, if you will. And there's, and immigrants is a big word, right? Immigrants comes from many countries and from many different ways. And the way immigrants have come to Scranton have been either because family members have been living here and they say, come, I have a house, I welcome you. And there's also a way of immigrants to what we call the Refugee Program. And essentially what that is the government has deemed that a nation needs some help because of something that the government determined was in crisis. And then they're able to apply for that and come. So we have people from Bhutan who were living in Nepal in the meantime, and then they came here. We have people from the Congo, we have people from Kenya. So we have all these different nations that have come here at different periods of time. And then we also have a big representation of the Latin community. here in Scranton for many, many different countries. And although people like to put us all the same, we're really not the same. We are different. We come from different countries. We do have the language that is Spanish, but we all have our idioms and colloquials that are different. So immigrants is really a big word that represents a lot of communities here in Scranton that has been growing. I've been living in Scranton since 2005, and there was already immigrants, and it's only been growing. And I think it's going to continue to grow because of the opportunities that Scranton offers as a city to those communities.
And so through this project, how have you been able to help educate, maybe spotlight some of the stories, the success, to help people understand the richness of the city and to even get conversation going so that there's more, maybe even empathy to some of the stories?
Yes, thank you. So I had two opportunities. Thank you to Julie for inviting me to be part of this project. There have been two opportunities. I belong to a church called St. John Newman, and we had a festival, and we called it Unity Festival because the people who were there, who now are Germans and Irish, came together with the new immigrants, and we call it a Unity Festival to celebrate was being together to celebrate our faith, really. And so at that, we had food from different countries, and we had music. So that has been an opportunity for people who went to that festival to say, look, we are really more similar than different. And this is an opportunity for all to start that conversation. The other opportunity has been that between September 15th and October 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month. And so a colleague of mine and I had the opportunity to do a letter to the editor to the newspaper where we kind of educate people about why it's Hispanic Heritage Month is celebrated in that time. And that, yes, we may speak Spanish, but we're really different, and how that those backgrounds that we have, which are Indigenous, Black, and European, really come alive in our music and our food, which is very visible, but also in other ways if you really get to know us. So that has been two opportunities to do that. In addition, I also wear the different booths that Kimberly and Julie mentioned. I try to be at those and continue to encourage people to share their stories that way.
That's wonderful. How is if you don't mind me asking, how has your experience been in Scranton?
So I had the really privilege when I moved to Scranton in 2005 that my family was here. And so my parents were here. And then I went to, as I said, St. John Newman Church. And because we are immigrants and we kind of know that we have left something behind. We came here for a chance for a new life. And so we really try to embrace each other and build a community outside of where we come from, because now this is where we live. And so I think it was a blessing and a privilege to be part of that. The greater Scranton, it has been slightly different, where I have experienced that people are welcoming and willing to help you, but it's all surface. So it's like, oh, it's nice meeting you and welcome. But then if you want to build friendships, it's kind of like, we already have our friends, we already have our neighborhoods. Because I've noticed that people here say, oh, my neighbor has been here. I know their grandma, and now I know their sons, and now they go to this school. So they have that really history between families and neighborhoods, while many who are coming have not had that opportunity because we just haven't built that yet. And so it takes a long time for somebody to open the doors of their heart to you. So they open the doors of their home if you need something, or at work, but to really build that intimate relationship, it takes more time and it's a little harder to build that. And so that has been my personal experience.
Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, and I understand what you're saying as someone who's lived here that long. It's a lot of, Scranton's been a long time of, oh, I know that person, and everybody knows everybody. So when they don't know you, there might be a little bit, their back might be up a little bit. In some cases, I would imagine language could be also possibly a barrier in some instances, but it's even more than that. So what do you think that, and projects like this help? What else can we do to kind of work on that? I mean, some people, you can't get to everyone, right? So obviously you can't get through to everyone, but how can we, what message can we get out to say, like, let's get to know one another and get to know the person, just because you haven't known their family forever, really, to try to build those relationships. How do you feel we can really build those relationships?
Yes, thank you. So just by talking to people, or maybe if you are like, what am I going to say, or how should I approach them? Then maybe I think that food is a great equalizer, where you can share a meal with somebody and then talk about that. Say, um, oh, this meal my family celebrated, or for Christmas, we kind of eat this, because many cultures share that. And so that could be a conversation to start. And then you're going to see that there's a lot of similarities instead of the differences. If you see somebody, a neighbor that maybe just moved to your neighborhood, just saying hello. You don't have to engage in conversation. You don't have to ask them about their whole life, but just saying hello. And then that person, both of you are going to say like, oh, I know that that's my neighbor, and that person's friendly, at least says hello to me often. And so it's just those small moments where we show our humanity, that we can really start building on that. And then I truly believe that we are going to realize that we have so much more in common than different, and that even though we are new to Scranton, we like it here. This is our home. This is where we have been. This is where we have been given an opportunity to really still believe in that American dream of like raising our family there, where it's safe, where there's opportunity for education, where we can buy a home, where we can own our business, which are things that many of us were not able to do, or we come from. And so we're not here just to come and take advantage and leave. No, we're here to build this community, and we want to do that. And we want to be invited to places where that is taking place, because we do want to be part of this community, and have for the past, 30 plus years.
Yeah. And I think you make a wonderful point. I had on, like I said, Stephanie Longo. She talked a lot about Italian food and culture. And, so much can happen around a meal, great conversation, great caring. And I always like to say, I mean, it's right now our country is really divided politically, with an unfortunate level of, it hurts sometimes, the level of hate that you feel like some people have. But, if we take a minute, we really do have a lot more in common than we are different. We all care about our families, we have loved ones, we have friends, we want to have a prosperous life, we all want to have a purpose, a job, and all of that is so true across the board. So that's an excellent point. Can you tell us a little bit about what's coming up on, I think it's October 25th, there's an event coming up. What's that going to be like, and what are some of those details?
Yes, absolutely. So we are excited. It's going to be an event on October 25th, where we're going to have our writers panel. So there's going to be people who are going to share their stories. And then we are inviting the community to be part of that. And we're going to kind of highly encourage people, maybe giving them a little push to actually have conversations with other people, perhaps somebody that you never met before or talked to before. And there's going to be some questions to kind of prompt that conversation, to kind of, so they don't feel awkward and say, I don't know what to say. Well, we're going to facilitate that. We're going to give you some questions so that you can start that conversation, and also exchange stories. As Kimberly was saying, there's a richness to stories. And so that's going to happen October 25th. And I'm just going to read you two of the prompts so that you can start thinking about them if people are interested in attending, or we hope that people are interested in attending. I'm going to tell you one, since we were talking about food. Tell a story about a recipe that particularly represents your family's culture, religion, or regional background. Do you know how to cook it? Because sometimes they're very labor intensive, and we kind of don't do those anymore.
Yeah.
Yes. And then another one that says, share something about how you or your family came to be in the United States and or Scranton, what about that journey or process shapes you today?
Those are
And
two
so we
great
hope,
questions. Yeah.
yeah, and so we hope to see you on October 25th.
That's awesome. I think, and as we talked earlier before we hit the record button, those conversations are so important. And I think, nowadays with social media, we read things that aren't always factual, and we like to air our opinions, but then we don't want to hear the other side. So it's really nice to have an opportunity where both sides can talk to one another, ask questions, see that we're humans and we're just humans trying to do our best, and especially have pride in where we are living together and make it a better community. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Alejandro?
I just want to say that we live in a place that has so much potential. People that have been living here have a rich history, people that are coming who want to make Scranton their home. And if we really work through those, challenges, we are going to address our issues because, we're going to bring different points of views, and then just make this even a better city than what it already is.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Alejandro. And before we close, is there anything from any of you, Julie, Kimberly, or Alejandro, that you just thought, oh, jeepers, we didn't talk about that? Can I just have a minute to say that? Anything you wanted to say before we close?
I'll just plug the project website because it's pretty easy. So it's scranton.edu, and then it's /Scranton story. So that's where you can find out about all these events coming up and all the details of time and location. Everything is free. All the events don't cost anything. Again, thanks to the National Endowment for the Humanities. And then also another shortcut is scranton.edu /I am Scranton. And that's where people can go and do what Kimberly was talking about, where they can just share their story themselves and submit that from the freedom of their own home. So if you come and see us at a story booth, but you're not quite ready, now you can do that online. And then there's also a page with all of our partners. I'm not going to name all of them, but again, this is a very broad project, and it's would not be possible without 20, 30, there's probably 30 different people who are part of our overall project steering committee. And I'm just so grateful. It's been a wonderful process, frankly, really, to just get to know colleagues and partners that I've known, but this has even deepened that. And again, I think that's part of what we can do as a committee that we can also hopefully have others be able to participate in. So I'm just grateful to all the different organizations that are part of it.
That's great. And I will put that in the show notes. And when I promote the podcast, I'll put the website link. And to follow on, I know I saw you guys on Instagram. I don't really even remember how or what is the handle on Instagram or Facebook?
Let me see real quick. I'll probably get it wrong. I think on Facebook it is, I think if you look it up, it says Scranton Story, Our Nation Story, like just the whole name of the title of the project. So that would come up. And then on Instagram, I believe it's like Our Scranton Story. So like just the part of, we're kind of thinking about what's my Scranton story. I am Scranton, but then what is our Scranton story? What do those stories mean when you put them all together? Not to try to have them all mean the same thing or, but just what do they look like? And again, I think that's going to help us think about the country more broadly as well.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. So I want to thank Julie. I want to thank Kimberly and Alejandro for joining this week. I think it's fantastic. And as I said, when I promote the podcast, I'll put in the links to the website. I'll mention where you can find them on Facebook and Instagram. And hopefully, please take advantage of these wonderful events if you are living in Scranton, especially, but even outside of Scranton, you want to check it out. Maybe you can bring something back to your own community, because I think this is a great model for other people to use to get people feeling proud of their region, understanding and learning, and then just talking to people that aren't just like them. Maybe they don't know them for 30 years, but guess what? Maybe you'll get a new friend and you could swap some recipes. And I think that would be great. So thank you again, ladies, for joining me. I appreciate it. And to my listeners, I really, I could not be prouder of living in Scranton. I always tell that to people. And I'm very happy to live here and have so many wonderful people, rich history, and just so much. So I would say to anyone who's coming to visit, check out things other than just, Cooper's and, on and on with the Dwight mural on the side. Those are cool. They're fun, but take time to learn more than that. Just, I think you'll really enjoy it. I think it's great. So thank you again, listeners. As I say always, I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.